Okay, so midterm will be here next week. You'll have a 3-hour window, open everything except open neighbor. Questions, and we're going to look at one in a second, but the questions will base, for the most part, will posit a situation that you're likely to encounter in the real world and ask you, what would you do in this case, or how would you set things up, or what are the risks that you see, or how might you mitigate these risks. There'll be at least one question that will talk about life cycle deliverables, so this is going to go back to your org charts and PERT and Gantt and so on and so forth. The way I structured it point-wise last semester was the whole exam was worth 150 points. That doesn't match what you currently have, because right now 1 point is 1% of your grade. I think the midterm is set up for 25 points is what you'll actually score. But in terms of scoring within the midterm, it will be something along these lines. 6 questions, each worth 25 points. There may be 1 or 2 questions that have an extra credit that allows you to get another 5 points. And then last semester I actually had an extra credit question. That was one you could do to make things up. And if you did, though, I'll have to debate whether or not to do it, because like I said, the averages are quite high anyway. This test is going to very much look like that. Sources are what we've been through. Mythical Man Month, Peopleware, Facts and Fallacies, 5 Orders of Ignorance, Webster readings 1 through 6. Though, as I pointed out, number 7, if you take a minute to go and look at it, actually click through from the site, what you'll see are all these pitfalls of software development. Some of those may be very, very handy and frankly a lot easier to get to more quickly than trying to figure out, okay, I know Brooks said something about this somewhere. So there's a big hint. All my in-class lectures are fair game. In fact, as you'll see with the example, the student who answered the question said, this is something Professor Webster said several times in class. I don't have an actual citation. And it was. It's something I'd said several times in class. So it's like, yeah, he's right with that. The slides are all online up through last week, and I'll have today's slides out later today. For any of you who want or need to make up absence, I've got video through, I think, 2 weeks ago. I don't have last week's up yet, but I can put that up. And I'll get today's up as soon as possible. Podcasts and slides are fair game. If you can point to a particular, podcasts are going to be kind of hard unless you actually have time sequences and say, well, yes, Dr. Knudsen at, 10:07 in this particular podcast made this comment. Slides might be better there. The readings associated with the podcast might be better. But any questions I ask will be answerable without having to refer to the podcast or their slides or their articles, just so you know.
Quick question.
Yes?
Never mind, you're about to answer.
Oh, yes. There we go. That's always a good feeling. Okay, citations. You must cite from at least one of the class sources. Feel free to cite to my lecture slides. Feel free to use omitted chapters or articles if you find them relevant. Feel free to cite from readings we haven't discussed. Feel free to use non-class sources you might find, but only in addition to a class source, not in place of one. And we're going to look at some of the form of citations by source, but it should be sufficient to show, saying Brooks is not good enough. And frankly, saying Brooks chapter 2 without actually indicating what you're pulling out of chapter 2 is enough. Now, because a lot of you have electronic stuff, I'm not worried about page number, but as you'll see here, saying, Brooks in chapter 2 said this, that's fine. So let's look at an actual question. This was the first question on the midterm last year. You're part of an IT team at Midco, working on developing from scratch custom accounting software for Midco. Of course, me being me, that's a big red flag right there, but that's a whole other discussion. The project is at least 2 months behind schedule, but the CEO, CFO, and CIO all agree that it absolutely must be in place on time. To that end, they're implementing the following changes. Development staff size will be doubled. All developers will be required to put in 20 overarching. You think I'm making this stuff up, okay? after I had given this midterm last week, my daughter Crystal at Solution Reach, which actually seems to be a fairly enlightened company, came back and said, yeah, we've got a new someone at the CXO level, and there's changes he wants to make, and there were about 3 of these that were on the list of changes he wanted to make. It's like, oh, Chris, this is so sad. Luckily, apparently, they talked him down off the ledge. All developers need to be in the office at 8 a.m. each morning for a mandatory 1-hour staff meeting. The scheduled time allotted testing will be cut in half. All year-end bonuses will be canceled if the project isn't on time. I have seen all these in real life. I have seen all these in real life. And I've seen multiple of these in combination in real life.
The 1-hour meeting every morning?
Oh yeah, that was actually one of the ones that Solution Reach wanted to do. We need to have, we have too many people working from home. We need them in here at 8 a.m. and we're going to have an immediate meeting first thing in the morning for all our development staff. And it's just kind of, I had to talk Chris down off the ledge actually herself. She's like, are they nuts? I said, yeah, actually they are. For 5 points each, explain why each proposal will not help. Giving at least 1 citation for each. And one, if I only ask for one, one's all you have to do. If you want to drag more in, that's fine, but manage your own time wisely. For extra credit, suggest a possible solution to the problem with at least 1 backing citation. So here is one actual answer. They got full credit. Sorry this is so small. He said, he basically what he does first he cites to Brooks, and he explains that adding staff to a late project makes it later. Citation, adding manpower to a late project makes it later. Chapter 2, mythical commandment. 2, overtime can be useful in short sprints, but over a long period of time will not help. Has a quote, chapter 3, subheading there ain't much such thing as overtime peopleware. So I know where he's quoting from. He actually cites some text in there, which is a nice anchor. It doesn't have to be extensive, enough that I know where you went to in that source to quote from. Meetings are necessary and useful. There should be meetings are, not meetings and. But it's important there needs to be, and so on. And then he has 2 citations with page numbers in his case out of peopleware. But again, the quotes. Testing. He quotes both a slide from, that was a presentation that I did last semester, I didn't do this semester. But he does have error removal as the most time-consuming phase of the life cycle, Fact 31, Facts and Fallacies, and of course, Brooks in Chapter 2 talks about that as well. One major concern with this proposal, that's the what is bonus cancellation, what was the, yes, all year-end bonuses. It will likely result in many employees leaving the company, and simply cites peopleware. I mean, those were all for me perfectly acceptable answers. It showed that the student knew the material, knew where to look, knew what was relevant, and got to it. And then the last one he has for the extra credit, if the product must truly be done on time and cannot be pushed back, then features need to be dropped in order to make it on time. Citation, class lectures, Professor Webster's repeated this a number of times, as you guys know.
Yes. You can upload this review slide as well.
Yes, this will be these slides will be up to date. So that's yes.
So formatting just as good. We don't need like an introductory or concluding paragraph.
Oh heavens, no. This will look. I mean, the test. Give me a second here. No. You don't need that. All I want to know is that you know. Down here. Give me a second here, and I will go to Learning Suite. Yeah. You all know my BYU ID. Test. Software engineering. Here we go. Where's my midterm? I'll go with the score because that'll. Okay, close your eyes. Here, actually, I'll say check. There we go. It's not showing student names anymore. So here's someone who looks like they got a pretty good score. So you can see here again, basically this is how the question will appear. And you'll have a box and you just write that. So no, I don't want an introduction, I want bam, 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 bam. So here's a second question. Again, here's a project, list five risks. And you've got, let's see here, where's my view here? Oh, it's formatting in front. Okay. So again, here you can see, this is the sort of thing I'm looking for. You know, what I need to know is that you know where to look for this stuff, that you can find it, and you can cite to it. It doesn't involve memorization. It involves being familiar with the literature and saying, oops, yeah, you know, gosh, we talked about that, or I read about that here. And since it's open book, open note, I mean, Glass is a great resource because you can always open the table of contents and say, oh yeah, look. Likewise, as I said, if you go to, let's go to materials, readings. If you go to Webster 7, this is what Webster 7 looks like. And each of those are a separate article. It's your next reading assignment. So there are ones there that may be useful or relevant if you're having a hard time finding something. Oh, sorry. If you're having a hard time finding something specific out of Brooks or People or whatever, go look at that. Go look at that. Go look at Glass. Those are a couple of good safety nets for being able to find something relevant. But I'm not going to try and do something obscure. The sad truth that I've learned after over 20 years of reviewing troubled and failing projects is that the root causes all tend to be pretty much the same. It really is. It's. I don't know if I've mentioned this to you before. When I first started, when I was hired by PricewaterhouseCoopers to be an expert witness, I'd never done that before. And the partner who hired me, Jeff Parmet, had a law degree and had a CS degree. And we'd get a call from a lawyer about a potential new case involving a failed or troubled project. And Jeff would, ask the lawyer to hold up, and he'd buzz me, and I'd come into Jeff's office, and Jeff would put the lawyer on speakerphone and say, okay, tell us, the facts of the case. And the lawyer would start talking within 1 to 2 minutes. Jeff and I could say, did this happen next? And then it was this, and the lawyer's like, how do you know that? It's because they're all the same. Once you know the basic foundation and the arc of the project, you can pretty much predict, here are the likely things that are going to go wrong, and the question is, okay, who did it? Was this the developer? Is this the customer? Is the customer, expanding the scope? Is the developer just not spending the time on testing or whatever? Yes, you had a question.
Yeah, I'm just curious, why do they need legal counsel, it sounds like, for failed projects? Like
it's when it goes to a lawsuit.
Yeah, so why would just, your project fails, that's shit.
Well, no, it's the failed lawsuit cases are ones where a company hires an outside development firm to implement, either develop the software or implement a product. I testified back in June in New York in district court on a case where a company that manufactures and repairs railroad cars had hired a vendor to come in and convert their legacy systems and install SAP, which is an enterprise resource planning software in their company. And it followed the pattern that we've talked about. Had a deadline, got within about 3 weeks. They slipped it 6 months, got within 3 weeks, slipped it 6 months, got within 3 weeks, and at that point the customer said, no, we're done and we want our money back. And the developer countersued saying, no, you still owe us money for this. And so it ended up in court. So that's why it ends up in court when it's a two-party suit. If it's simply an internal failure, no. Legal counsel seldom, if ever, gets involved. So that's your prep for the midterm. I mean, I'm not going to go over 8 weeks of lecturing. Everything else. The lectures are out there. The slides are out there. And for Mythical Man Month, I mentioned this at the very start. You may have forgotten. If you go to chapter, and I don't have my copy, I want to say 17. Who has Mythical Man Month with them? Look at chapter 7. I think it's 17. Is basically an outline of the original Mythical Man Month stuff up through, I think, Silver Bullet. Maybe not including Silver Bullet. So that's a good cheat sheet for looking up Mythical Man Month references, because he basically has each of the chapters and has the key points he makes in each chapter. So, study that, whichever chapter that is.
No silver bullet?
No, it's 2 after No Silver Bullet. What chapter is No Silver Bullet?
17, so it's 19.
So it'd be 19, yeah, chapter 19.
Mythical Man Month after 20 years.
Yeah, and he just basically has an outline of his chapters and the points in there. Yeah. So that's a great thing to review before the test, just to sort of refresh your mind. And if you've got a copy, put a bookmark in there or something, so that when it's like, oh, I think this is in Brooks, I will go through chapter 19 real quick. So that's a great shortcut. Table of contents for facts and fallacies is a great shortcut. Frankly, if you simply look through the table of contents that people wear, you can probably pretty much guess where you're going to find something. Except they tend to be cutesy in a lot of their chapter titles. So it's not always obvious exactly. Vienna waits for you, okay? Yeah. That's nice, it's Billy Joel, but that doesn't tell you what the chapter's about. And the readings, I think most of the titles are self-explanatory. And like I said, the Webster 7, the Pitfalls, is a good backstop. If you're having trouble, look there real quick and see if any of those seem to match what you're trying to hit on. Any other questions? Yes?
I just made like a cheat sheet of where each chapter.
You can make whatever cheat sheets you want.
Sounds good.
And I think I said this once to you, but the most satisfying moment for me, all of last semester, which is my first semester teaching it, was grading the midterm. Because average score was probably over 90% on the midterm. But what I saw was virtually every student. There were a few who clearly had not been doing the reading and the work, and they didn't do terribly well. But virtually everyone else went there, had the citations, and my basic thought was, my work here is done. These students are prepared. They're going to go out in the real world, and they're going to say, oh my gosh, Professor Webster was right. I thought he was exaggerating, but he really is. He really is right as far as he sings it happen. Anyway, any other questions about the midterm? We'll go over the score of the midterm the week after. And in fact, let me just look at the class schedule real quick here. I've made it clear that you don't have to get your system working. That's actually not part of your score on the projects. But you need to be putting that time in and actually getting things done. Don't be the person who lets the rest of your cast down. So, yeah, we'll have the midterm discussion on the 13th. No, we have midterm on the 13th and discussion on the 20th, which is the week of Thanksgiving. So all we'll basically do on the 20th is we'll go over the midterm and talk about the answers. And then I'll probably just say, go have a happy Thanksgiving. I've structured so that there are no podcasts due Thanksgiving week. There shouldn't be anything that you have to check off Saturday night on Thanksgiving weekend. If there is, let me know. I'll change it. And then we'll have really 2 more lectures, one of which will be talking in more detail about software quality assurance. I have to ping my daughter to see if I can get her to come in, and if she can, then she'll probably be the other one. And we'll do the video presentations, and then if anyone feels they really need to make up extra credit, I'll put together a final exam. So, you know, you guys are already about 80% of the way through the class, if not more at this point. There's a bit more reading to do and so on and so forth, but other than that, you're doing great. And that's what you need to know in order to pass this midterm. I'll put the slides up. Don't worry, that'll help you there. Any other questions about the midterm? So, okay.